somewhere else, like up there where you parked on the lawn, or back out over here.
I've done that before. Yeah. You ever start your day in Rayburn and end up in Park?
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't been to Park in years. I'm just going on over there. There's like during when they're writing bills and stuff. Working on things over there.
It just depends on who's in the news, man, and where his office is, you know.
Schwarzenegger?
Really?
He was up there for a couple of things 2 years ago. I don't know if that was an office up there. It's so weird to see him walk around.
Coolest thing I ever saw.
You've never seen him, Dave?
Huh?
You've never seen him?
No. Coolest thing I ever saw was one time I was shooting a markup in Ways and Means, and we were getting ready to go to the men's room, and walking down the hallway, there's a old white guy in a suit, but you never see that, right? I got up to him, and it was Dave from Wendy's.
Oh, Dave?
Yeah, Dave Powers. It was him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
The most interesting man in America was in the world was in Russell Rotunda 4 or 5 months ago.
That's interesting.
Who's that?
The Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the
Oh,
world.
was he?
Yeah.
Probably alone without his 2 women.
The craziest one I've seen was when Prince Harry came.
Oh, that must have been nuts.
That was
I have passed Don Henley coming into the White House as I was leaving.
oh really?
And walked past Michael Douglas as he was walking down the drive towards the North Portico. I told him, I said, Mr. President, how are you?
Who's the president?
Yeah, it was a movie, played the president. You remember the thing in the movie.
Harvey Keitel was in the briefing room in the White House one day.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even paying attention because there's so many people that come in there.
Totally.
And I just hear this voice. I was like, holy shit, that sounds like Harvey Keitel.
I think he is.
And there he is. It was the wolf.
Yeah.
The wolf guy. Nobody sounds or looks anything like that guy.
So Wayne Newton coming in.
You know, this is gonna be on that same thing.
Lenny Kravitz.
You can't.
I think they're still gonna go before.
This is where as you walk in the door and you walk left to walk down the hallway, right there used to be a collection of reels. That's where all the reels were kept. And I walked in one night and there's this guy with all these dreadlocks sitting there. I'm walking, that's weird. I look back, it's Lenny Kravitz sitting right there.
Just look at him and go, hey, how's Weezy? She's still alive.
Huh?
She's still alive. That's his mother.
Yeah.
Look it up right now.
You don't hear anything about him anymore.
About 5 more minutes.
Isabel Sandler.
That was his mother?
Ashley, he was standing outside.
Yeah. That's his real name.
The guy from
strings behind the Today Show.
I think they let you credit.
Who knew? My kidney. Yeah, they found a lump on my kidney a couple of years ago. They took it out, they did the pathology, 2 days later, they told me it was cancer.
Heads up.
You're all here for the blood drive? I'll be here all week. Horse walks into a bar.
She's on her way. She said.
All right. I will. All right. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. I'd like to start just by talking a little bit about how I got here, very briefly. When the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United, in the midst of what was my first run for Congress, I made a promise that if elected, I'd introduce a constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics. And when I got here, I was heartened to meet other lawmakers who believed in this cause as well, great leaders who had stepped up to lead the effort to get money, big money, out of politics. Among them, my friends John Larson, Jim McGovern, and Donna F, all of whom have led in this effort from the moment the Citizens United decision came down, and all of whom are here with us today. It's an honor to work alongside them to restore integrity to our elections. But if there is one colleague that I want to thank for helping to drive this movement forward, it's our Democratic leader, who is on her way here, and for timing is good, she'll walk in as I finish. I want to thank Leader Pelosi for refusing to let this issue go. Overturning Citizens United is not an issue that the leader mentions from time to time because it polls well. But believe me, it polls well. When it comes to getting big money out of our elections and promoting the voice of the average American, I've seen Leader Pelosi talk about it on the floor. I've seen her speak about it in caucus, and I've seen her talk about the importance of getting big money out of politics in cities across the country. It's my pleasure to introduce her to you now so that she can say a few words about how important this really is. Madam Leader.
Thank you very
of course.
much. Thank you, Congressman Deutch, for your kind introduction, and more importantly, for your great leadership on this subject, your persistent, determined, relentless leadership to come to terms on an amendment that we all agree to as we go forward. It is my pleasure to be here with these distinguished House members, all of whom have played a role one way or another to make us what we are, a democracy, a government of the many, not a government of the money. Our founders sacrificed their lives, their liberty, their sacred honor, in their own words, to establish this democracy. What you see before you are some of America's patriots are here to fight for that democracy. Some of the things that we have to do to restore confidence in our democracy is to reduce the role of money. It has a suffocating impact, suffocates the airwaves with confusion and not knowing what the source of the money is, special interest from who knows where, and that's just not right. Mr. Sarbanes is here, and he has a solution to that to empower small donors in all of this. So I'm proud to be with all of them here. Of course, John Larson is chairman of our House Elections Task Force, and he has been relentless in the 4 areas of the DARE that I put forth. Disclose. Mr. Ben Holland has that legislation. Disclose. It passed the House 2 times when we had the majority. Never could get that 60th vote in the Senate. Disclose where's this money coming from. Not only disclose where it's coming from, but in real time to see it when ads go up, who paid for this. Amend the Constitution. Thank you, Congressman Deutch, for your leadership in bringing so many folks together on this. Amend the Constitution. Reform. Thank you, Mr. Sarbanes, for the reform bill, government of the by the people legislation that empowers small donors and empower. Because that empowerment, we can remove all the obstacles of participation that Republicans want to put up throughout the country, and they are doing that. But the suffocation of the airwaves does more to discourage voting because it confuses the issue. And this is really important because not only are we restoring confidence in our democracy, we're restoring confidence in our economy, that decisions are made for the American people and not for the special interest. What happens, Walter Reuther said, at the ballot box cannot be separated from what happens in the bread box. That is, there is a direct relationship. So if we want policies that are more for the American people, for strengthening the middle class, lifting people who aspire to it into the middle class, we have to have policies that do that. And if we want those policies, we have an electoral system that makes all parties, all people running, aware of the fact that people are paying attention, that they are voting, and that these are issues they care about. And what they do care about is being in the middle class, which is the backbone of our democracy. What we're seeing happen here today to mitigate for the damage done by the courts is, again, an act of patriotism, and I salute my colleagues for their leadership on this. And it is now my pleasure to introduce a person who's been relentless in this pursuit, Mr. Larson. He has had endless meetings, endless in length and endless in number on the subject. Way to go. He has been persistent, and not only in this and going into the next phase, which is commission redistricting and issues like that as well. All of it to empower the American people, all of it honoring the vision of our founders and a way to have a better future for our children. Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Madam Leader. Well, thank you, Madam Leader. At the close of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, as Ben Franklin was exiting the convention, a woman yelled to him, "Do we have a monarchy or a republic?" Franklin responded, "A republic if you can keep it." And the republic today is in peril because, as Ted pointed out, it's awash in the influence of money. I want to echo Ted's sentiments and complimenting our leader, who has always been in the forefront of this issue, insisting that we approach it not in a piecemeal basis, but we do this comprehensively. It's an honor to chair a task force. Her charge was to say, we have so many talented individuals within this caucus and so many great ideas. It's the vitality of those ideas that we have to bring forward to the American people to continue to differentiate our approach and the approach of our colleagues. I'm pleased to say, because a lot of their work, this has bipartisan support. In fact, very much American support, because at its core, it gets to what Justice Breyer said in his dissent in the McCutcheon case. The amount of money in this system can tune out those that do not have a voice. And so I commend my colleagues. And the leader pointed out Ted's leadership, but I want to say that Donna Edwards, certainly, and Jim McGovern, the three of them. In fact, there were more than 14 separate proposals that have come forward with respect to a constitutional amendment to right this system. But the leader, persistent and insistent that we come together, and these members, working with one another, came up with a unified approach, an approach that is vitally important to making sure that the American people get their voice and we have an opportunity to restore this republic. I am honored to have had the task force that, as the leader enumerated, is comprehensive in both disclosure, in reforming the system, in empowerment of the voters, and making sure that we have elections that are affordable and accessible to all of our citizens. I'm honored as well to introduce our next speaker, who has always been in the forefront of making sure we keep the republic, Jim McGovern.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And I think this is an important day because we've come to an agreement. As John Larson said, that many of us had introduced various proposals, and we have all come behind one proposal. And we're going to work together to try to get it passed, get it brought to the House floor. The fact is, money is polluting our politics. The torrent of money in our elections is undermining our democracy and threatening fair elections. And since the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United, it has gotten worse. During the 2012 elections after Citizens United, we saw billions of corporate dollars flowing into our political campaigns, drowning out the voices and interests of ordinary Americans. And unless we act, it's going to get a lot worse. Our democracy is supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And this is supposed to be the people's house, not the corporation's house. The American people want to take their country back. And that's why I'm proud to stand here today with with Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi, my friends John Larson, Ted Deutch, Donna Edwards, John Sarbanes, and all the others that are up here with me to introduce a sensible constitutional amendment, H.J. Res. 119, to overturn these decisions and make clear that Congress and the states have the authority to regulate and set reasonable limits on the raising and spending of money to influence elections. As John Larson mentioned, for the past 2 years, we've had a task force on elections reform, and we have worked together, and we have come up with this consensus bill. I know the Senate plans to vote on this constitutional amendment. I hope we can convince Speaker Boehner to allow us to have a little democracy in the House floor and allow this to come before all my colleagues so we can have a vote, so people go on record, up or down, whether they support more money in elections or regulating money. Let me just finally say, I just came from the Rules Committee where it gets frustrating to sit up there day after day as this assault on poor people and on middle-class families continues. And I think that what fuels that agenda is not just a rigid ideology, but is big money. Big money that says that our priority, that Congress's priorities ought to be in corporate tax loopholes and giveaways, and at the expense of middle-class families, at the expense of the most vulnerable. In order to change that, we need to change the fact that we have too much money in our politics. And so I appreciate being here. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce a true leader on this issue who has been talking about this issue long before me, Congresswoman Donna Edwards from Maryland.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to our leader, Pelosi, for really opening the door for us to be able to get to a moment when many of us who have a lot of different ideas about how we need to change the system have been able to come together united behind this constitutional amendment and under the leadership of John Larson and, of course, Ted Deutch and our other colleagues. The price tag for the last election cycle, according to the FEC, was about $7 billion. Just 31,385 people all total contribute to any federal elections. That represents about 1% of the 1%. That's of the disclosed contributions. We have a system in which private money and big money has just flooded out and drowned the voices of the American people. when Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission was decided, I read the decision like a good lawyer. I read the dissent, and it reminded me how important it is for us as legislators to be able to protect our democracy and to create a system of fair elections. And what the court said there, and I didn't agree with the court, but what the court said there was that corporations can contribute just as much as they want into the political process. The decision also said that Congress doesn't have any authority to regulate that. And then we thought that that was bad enough, and the Supreme Court comes back in the McCutcheon decision and says yet again, Congress doesn't have the authority. Well, the fact is that under our system, the only way for Congress to get that authority is to do it by constitutional amendment. And that's what brings us here today. None of us takes lightly the idea of amending the Constitution. It's an arduous process, and it's one that requires supermajorities of us. But the fact is that the Supreme Court has really not left us any other choice but to amend the Constitution so that we restore the kind of fairness that the American people expect in their elections. And so I thank our leadership and look forward to joining with so many of our colleagues who have a lot of different ideas, but are united behind the fact that we believe that we have to restore fairness to the election process, and that the Congress and the states should have the authority to regulate the participation of corporations and individuals in our campaign financing. And I think when we can do that, when we bring this constitutional amendment to the floor, when we bring it to the American people, Democrats and Republicans, are going to embrace it because they know what a distance this money system has created for them with their own republic. And so I'm looking forward to marching around to every single congressional district in this country, to making the argument with the American people, and to doing what some people say is the impossible, and that is making sure that the constitutional amendment, in fact, is enacted. And I think that when we can restore that kind of confidence in our system of governance, when we restore that confidence in our elections, then the American people will have confidence in the other business of this great nation. And I thank our leadership, and with that, would like to ask our leader, Ted Deutch, to return. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donna. I am I'm proud to be here introducing this amendment with the heavy support of our caucus. But make no mistake, only in Washington is getting money out of politics a partisan issue. Poll after poll across the country shows that Republicans and Democrats and independents alike are disgusted by big money in our elections. They're disgusted by the influence of special interests in Washington. Already, hundreds of elected officials around the country representing millions of people and 16 states have endorsed a constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics. The sad truth is that for most Americans, their influence in our government and their faith in this democracy have diminished each time the Supreme Court has ruled that more money can come into our elections. The fact is that seniors living on Social Security don't have super PACs. Impoverished children are not among the tiny sliver of mega millionaires who hit the aggregate limits that were struck down by McCutcheon. And both Citizens United and McCutcheon have proven to us that the 5-4 majority on the court lives in a universe where corporations and mega millionaires have a First Amendment right to exert more influence over government than actual voters, but that's not where America lives. The Supreme Court has stripped away the legitimacy of campaign finance laws so that the only ones left standing are those that guard against quid pro quo bribes between candidates and donors. Well, it may not be quid pro quo corruption, but when elected officials spend more time dodging super PAC attacks than championing their constituents' interests, our democracy is dysfunctional. And dysfunction like that is a form of corruption. America was founded on the principle that we're all political equals. The ballot of a billionaire should be worth no more than that of a school teacher. Limiting how much money the wealthy can pour into our elections ensures that all Americans have an equal say in the direction of our democracy. Legislative fixes won't do when the Supreme Court says that limits on spending in our elections are unconstitutional. That's why we need to amend the Constitution. That's why we're introducing the Democracy is for All Amendment. This amendment will resurrect the principle of one voice, one vote by enshrining in the Constitution a right to limit money in politics and protect the integrity of the electoral process. This is going to be a long battle, but when it comes to restoring Americans' faith in democracy, it is absolutely one worth fighting. I am honored to be here, surrounded by my colleagues, those I've already mentioned, Mr. Yarmouth, Mr. Cicilline, Mr. Kilmer, and of course, John Sarbanes, who has been a leader in the reform movement. And with that, I'll invite the leader back up, and if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Can you comment about what the strategy is for advancing this? You have support from most of the Democrats in the House, it seems like, but it also seems unlikely that you'll have Republican support or the Speaker bringing it up for a vote. And what can you do to advance this at this point?
In this, as always, Lincoln spoke very clearly. Public sentiment is everything. This is where the public is. Democrats, Republicans, no party affiliation. People believe that the Supreme Court decision that gave corporations the ability to put endless special interest secret money into campaigns was wrong. We in California, I was very pleased being out there. We had one of our party meetings this weekend, and the state legislature has just passed a law to legislation waiting for the governor's signature to put on the ballot the overturning of Citizens United. We think that will fly through the electorate in our state. But as has been mentioned, 16 other states have registered their concern about this. But this is something about the outside, and it's tough. It's, as Congresswoman Edwards said, this is going to be difficult. But I will tell you that there's a fertile opportunity out there because the public understands that this is not what our founders intended. Mr. Deutch referenced how the court said it's only if it's absolute corruption, quid pro quo, and the rest. Well, whether it's corruption or not, there is a corrosion of our democracy in this decision. And there is a diminution of confidence in our democracy. And that skepticism and that corrosion are not healthy things for a democracy, and they certainly are not a model to the rest of the world as they undermine what was intended for our country. So this is a fight. I can tell you, as you travel through a country, I don't care what the audience is, where you are, if it's a university campus or if it's wherever you are, if you say we are for overturning Citizens United, you will get a standing ovation. Any of my colleagues, anyone else want to speak to that?
I'd only add two things. One, there is a broad coalition of public interest groups and their members who are wholly supportive of what we're trying to accomplish here today. And I just make the point again, all of those elected officials, the city council members, the county commissioners, the state representatives and state senators around the country who represent millions of Americans, their constituents are the same constituents who are represented by members of Congress. And just as all of those citizens have reached out and supported and endorsed the efforts at a local level for them to advocate for a constitutional amendment, so too they will be heard in advocating for Congress to move forward with this constitutional amendment.
And they were largely responsible for our success in California, those outside
The outside
groups.
Madam Leader, there seems to be a growing chorus of Democrats who are saying that the issue of changing the 2008 anti-trafficking law should be put off for another day. The Congress should just focus on the emergency order.
I'll be happy to take that question at the end, but I'd like to stay focused on this for the moment. And any other comments our colleagues may have on the previous question or anything that you heard here. Any other questions on the subject we're gathered to talk about? Yes.
When we're clearly heading into the election, I mean, this is something that seems to come up in even years a little bit more. How are you guys planning on using this as a campaign trail? And do you feel like this is a strong play? Obviously, this is a long-term project, but how do you see this working out in
I'm sure my colleagues have plenty to say on this issue. John and Donna.
I'll just be very brief. First of all, I think it is true what the leader says. It almost doesn't matter what constituency, what community you're in front of. When you talk about the corrosive impact of the Citizens United decision and then the subsequent decisions, people get that. And this isn't about this next election. This is about our republic and the health of the republic. And people at home understand that, and they will make sure that members of Congress understand that, whether that's in the context of the 2014 election or it's simply in the context of getting them to sign on as co-sponsors of the Democracy is for All constitutional amendment, because they get the fact that money is completely drowning their voices. And no one wants to tolerate that anymore. And so I have great confidence in the American people that they are going to convince members of Congress to do what we might not be convinced to do standing on our own.
I think that this is going to be an issue that motivates the electorate in every single election until it's solved. And so that begins with the 2014 election, and it goes from there. The intensity of it cuts across the political spectrum. If you stand in front of the typical audience out there of the public, oftentimes if you don't start with this issue of the influence of big money on politics and government and how the voices of everyday people are being drowned out, they don't hear anything else that you say. So it's the way you do sort of the sound check on the mic when you're talking to the public today. And if you do that, then all the other issues that are important, all the things that people want to see happen here in this Congress, in Washington, in our government, they become relevant to the conversation again. But if you don't solve this problem, people don't think you can solve any of the rest of it. So as a motivator, something to bring voters out, I think you'll find in 2014 and beyond, this is a terrific issue, and it's an important issue.
Any other questions on this important subject to our democracy? I do want to also say, I mentioned in the DARE, the Disclose, Amend, Reform, and Empower, and John Lewis and Mr. Clyburn have that empowerment legislation to remove obstacles of participation. One of those obstacles is big money in the political system. Today we've had meetings all day. We talked about ENDA early this morning. Oh, well, certain business interests don't want ENDA to go forward. The speaker says it's going to cost jobs. It hasn't in any of the states where it existed, and that's ending discrimination against the LGBT community. We then met on the subject of the Voting Rights Act, which is stalled. You would think that would be the first thing we would do. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, and at the same time ignoring the fact that the court, again, in its lack of wisdom, has made done serious damage to the Voting Rights Act, and this Congress has still not acted. The next meeting we have on immigration reform, no action. Raise the minimum wage, no action. Unemployment insurance, no action. Well, why do you think that is? If the public's voice could be more firmly heard by the Congress of the United States, we would be responding to issues that have overwhelming support in the public and not dominated by the special interest in Washington, D.C. So again, as Walter Reuther said, the bread box and the ballot box cannot be separated. They have a relationship, and we have to make sure people have access to the ballot. So congratulations to all of you in coming to agreement on this legislation. Congratulations, Steve. With your permission, I'll take that other question if you want to go vote, because the vote is on. What you want to frame it?
Mr. Hoyer, that this issue of changing the 2008 law of dealing with kids from Central America should be put off for another day, and the focus should only be on the appropriations. A lot of opposition within your caucus to this.
To changing the law? Yes, indeed, there is. As many of you know, the law that was there were three. A law in the 90s, a court decision, Reno, Flores versus Reno, the 2002 law, which was establishing the Department of Homeland Security, and the 2008 law, the Wilberforce law, all have an impact on how people coming into our country are treated. The Wilberforce more directly to children. And unfortunately, all of its good intentions, one of its bad features was that it made a distinction between kids from contiguous countries, that'd be Mexico and Canada, and kids from Central America. We'd like all kids to be treated equally. The change in the law is to treat them equally in the bad way and not in the positive way in the bill, so that they'd all have due process before they're turned back. I think you're right. There is concern in our caucus about changing that law, but we do need to have the supplemental is absolutely urgent that we do, and any discussion of any changes in the supplemental must include due process for these kids, so we treat them on a case-by-case basis. Law enforcement, judges, all of the rest of it, but also to minister to their needs as they come into the country. Some of these are 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. I saw them a week and a half ago in Brownsville, Texas. I just remind you that in opposing that, we associate ourselves with the principles set forth in the National Catholic Conference of Bishops, and theirs they begin reminding us that the baby Jesus was a refugee fleeing violence. They take us, and then they end by saying to send these children back would be like sending them back into a burning building. Well, somewhere in between, we must have due process, we must be respectful, and we cannot change the law unless there's such a mitigation within the law to give them due process in a shorter period of time. But you're right, there is a great deal of unease in our caucus on this subject. But again, we have to do what's right in the best interest of the children. That's the standard of the UN, that's the standard of the bishops, that's the standard of any country of values, which is certainly who we include ourselves to be. And we also have to appreciate what it means to communities. We have to have, we have to manage the issue well, but we have to do it true to our values. And as I said, just read the bishop's report or the UN report. I think you will find it very much in support of my member's position on not changing this law. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations. Oh, this is very good. Yeah, no. Good job. Good work.